Okay.
Well, it looks like we're live.
Okay, good.
Uh, I'm here with Jacob Holm-Lupo and of White Willow, the Opium Cartel, Telepath, and something new you said was coming out.
Yeah, I call it Donner.
An electronic band.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I got a chance. You sent me the link for that, and it sounds really good.
Thanks.
It's really neat when musicians don't just stay stuck in one style that they, because I think it helps them expand how they approach music. Instead of being an all metal band or all prog band, uh, at least from what because I've heard many different musicians tell me that they feel if they just stay in one style, um, it's kind of can almost be eventually get stuck in a rut.
Yeah, you easily get stuck in a rut. And so
And
for my part, I always wanted to do a lot of different kinds of music, but it was really just when I got my own studio that I was able to do it, because a label isn't necessarily like we were on the Laser's Edge and doing prog rock, and they're not necessarily gonna be crazy about it if I tell them, listen, I want to do a synth pop project. They don't have, that's not their audience. But since I became able to record my own music, suddenly I was free also to make whatever music I wanted, because I didn't have to lay the costs at labels. So that's really what liberated me and enabled me to do a lot of different things.
yeah, I used to be as a listener, I used to be stuck in certain styles from from the mid '80s to about the mid '90s. I would only listen to specific stuff, like from '85 to '90. All I was listening to was thrash metal
Yeah.
and speed metal, stuff like that. And then I got into prog, and I was then I was only listening to prog. And then after, I think it wasn't until like 2000 that I just go, I can listen to them. I have equal, my ears can be shared with different kinds of music, and ever since then, it's like my mind and my ears have been just open to new things, and that's when, and I think it's probably on the same way as with a musician. It's like if you, I think you're kind of being selfish to your ears, only listening to one kind of music.
Yeah, I think that's true. Absolutely.
And
And also
and
making different kinds of music satisfies different parts of you. And I think as a listener as well, there are different kinds of music that satisfy different parts of you. So you just feel more well-rounded, if you can appreciate metal and jazz and rock, and of course being able to play a lot of different things is even more satisfying. So yeah, I think it's mental health basically.
oh yeah, and especially nowadays, it's like uh, both the musician and the listener, since we're in this worldwide pandemic, to only listen to one kind of music, again, or only make only one kind of music. Now is the time to take advantage of, for the musician to expand what he or she plays, and then for the listener to expand what he and she listens to. You know,
Absolutely.
because you know, for the listener, we can't go to concerts, and then also for the musician, they can't play live. So it's like we have that time, you know, opened up that we can use until we're I like back to some sort of a normalcy.
Yeah.
You know,
We'll see.
well, you know, I would kind of call it I say normal in a way of that where you can get back to your business and of making music, and then if you're going to play live to showcase that music in a live setting, and then for your fan base to go and see you live.
Mm.
Um, but until then, we have um, that time that is just, you know, I see a lot of people complaining, and it's like, well, you know, you can sit there and complain all you want, but complaining is not going to make it change. So in the meantime, for the audience, go listen to something. You probably say, well, I'll listen to that another time. Well, this is that other time.
Yeah, that's
And
exactly true. And I find that for myself too. I mean, all this extra time that we have on our hands, I've been able to go back, you know, to vinyl records I haven't listened to in ages. I've been able to explore things I haven't listened to before. Only today I went into our storage room and I pulled out some crates of CDs which have been stored away for a long time. I came across this bunch of Spanish prog CDs that I bought at some point and never really got around to listening to.
right,
So I'm doing that. You know, it's you can rediscover things, you can discover new things. And as we've talked about movies, you know, suddenly you have time to watch all those movies you never got around to, or
oh
maybe
yeah,
old favorites. Yeah.
oh yeah, and it's like, and speaking of movies, you know, since we both like horror movies, and if you notice that a majority of the soundtracks are done by uh, progressive musicians,
Hmm.
you know, whether it's rock or, you know, or whatever, you know, it's like I mean, you got, you know, Goblin one, and then there are different factions that they
Mm.
have, you know, solo and different versions of Goblin. Um,
Yeah.
and then, you know, it's like, it's weird that horror movies and prog have that connection.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too. And I think there's a lot of I mean, like John Carpenter, okay, maybe his soundtracks are not super proggy in themselves, but he's a big prog rock fan. And I don't know if you've heard the records that he's done lately with his son. His son is sort of a fusion prog rock musician, and that's totally prog rock. And then, of course, you had Tangerine Dream doing soundtracks like that. Klaus Schulze did some horror soundtracks on his own. So there's a definite sort of kinship there. And of course, if you look at prog rock itself, you know, it often dealt with gothic themes and supernatural themes. So yeah, there's a connection there.
Oh yeah, that have you ever considered doing, you know, a soundtrack for a horror movie if anybody would, you know, contact you about that?
Yeah, I would probably like to do it. I've done a little bit of soundtrack work, sort of on and off for smaller indie projects. My I think my main problem is that I'm very independent minded and a bit of a control freak. So when you do movie music, you have to be very adaptable. You have to sort of bow down to the director and you have to take a lot of instructions. Can you move this part around there? Can you do that in a different key? Can you not do that? And I tend to not respond super well to those things. So
Right.
if I'm working with, you know, someone who just wants my music and we see eye to eye exactly on what's supposed to, you know, happen, then I think it's wonderful. And lately I've been working with one of the journalists in Prague magazine who's doing these little stories that he's telling through YouTube videos, and I'm making music to that. And we see eye to eye, so that's no problem. I play what I feel, and he likes it, and it melts together well. But I think at some point I would probably like to do something real soundtracky, and of course, preferably something horror related.
Well, I heard it both in of two of your bands, White Willow and Telepath. I've heard when I close my eyes to listen to it, I can actually see kind of a wintry theme horror movie happening. You know, not so much, not like a, you know, the slasher, but something that has some sort of mythology to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, up in your area, there's, you know, a lot of amazing mythology that
for sure
that can be tapped into. You know, that, you know, some haven't. I mean, I've seen some pretty. It was two. I believe there were Norwegian horror movies, Dead Snow, and Dead Snow 2. They were zombie ones, and
cool.
And it was just amazing when I heard it was in Norwegian, but they had the English subtitles. They had one that had dubbed, but I don't know. A majority of the time, whenever they dub them, they always get weirdest American accents, you know, actors are doing. And it's like, and so listening to your language and then seeing the subtitles, it's like you can see, I can hear, and it's almost like, you know, that's so close that the subtitles are just like helping you along. You know, you can hear what's going on, but you know, there's a lot, you know, since you guys are, you know, you have those long, cold winters, you know, almost the same as here in Maine.
Yeah.
Not quite. I mean, we don't start until like usually mid-November, sometimes a little sooner, but and then it usually dies down around February or March.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot of untapped potential in terms of Nordic horror in general. We've had a wave now of popular TV shows with like Nordic crime stories, but I think Nordic horror would be cool, and especially if you bring in some mythology elements. And did you see that Swedish movie Sensommer? I don't know what it's called. It's sort of like a Wicker Man concept, the Swedish movie.
Oh, Midsummer?
Midsummer, right? Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet, but I keep on hearing so many people talking about it, you know, mixed. And I did see it on Amazon. They had it for Blu-ray for under $8, so I might just
it's worth checking out. It's not a perfect movie, but it does combine horror and you know, a little bit of Nordic sort of pagan mythology stuff. So it's fun.
Yeah, those are things that I like, you know, that they kept. Because you know, on my father's side, my ancestors are German and Hungarian, so and I know that most likely that the people from that area were migrated down from you know, the Scandinavian area and that. So it's like, so we have a similar, I mean, that's what draws me into the, you know, the Nordic mythology and then, like you said, you know, if you did something like that, but with horror involved. But I like to have one that's not silly, you know, something that's, you know, I mean, kind of drama comedy, how life is,
Mm,
'cause we do get some funny moments in life and some serious. So it's like, but that, music wise, I go back to your music, and a majority of the prog bands from Scandinavia have that feel
mm,
where, and I just really, like when I first saw you guys live, and I'm glad you reminded me of the year. I remember seeing you, I just didn't remember the year. Um, in '95,
yeah.
Los Angeles.
Yep.
Um,
That
that's the
was
one
it was
thing.
yeah.
That's the one thing with Greg Walker when he did those prog fest. He knew he could pull in a lot of great bands. He seemed to find them more from outside the United States.
Mhm.
There's not too many at that time, there in the mid '90s that were going around in bands in the United States. It wasn't really until maybe later on and into the 2000s that there would become more American prog bands.
Mm, yeah. No, but he really had his finger to the pulse. I think that particular prog fest, it was us, it was Landberg from Sweden, fantastic band. The Japanese girl trio, Ars Nova.
Yes.
They were really fun. There's Machina, was it Deus Ex Machina from Italy, I
Oh, yeah. From
think.
Italy, yes.
So lots of great bands, and of course Fox Beard before they really made it. And their concert I thought was maybe one of the best during that festival. They were really, really good.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, did they film that?
They did actually. I only recently got the video because Tita, the violinist in the band, had that, and she sent it to me. So, but I haven't actually had time to see it yet. But I think there's like 2 VHS tapes that together are basically the whole concert. I don't think it's been made available on DVD or Blu-ray, but it was filmed. And it was the sound guy at that festival was Kevin Gilbert.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, rest in peace.
No, that he, I know that a lot of musicians, especially from that time, they were, and actually, I wouldn't say just that time, but that was more of them, were going too soon, you know, cause,
Mm.
and because I know quite a few friends that are musicians, and they tend to be a little more on the tortured side because of all that stuff that's going on inside their brain with music. Um, and it's a shame that he left us too soon
Yeah,
because I think he was just right on the verge of true greatness.
yeah, yeah, it seemed like it. Absolutely.
And but at least we have the music, and the music is what makes the musicians, in my opinion, immortal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you may not be able to see the person or the band, but you can hear them, or if you have videos of them, you can see them.
Mm.
And that's why I was, it'd be really cool if someone did go back to those festivals and release that music on Blu-ray or a DVD, either
Yeah.
one. So at least people that missed it, because I talked to a lot of people and they didn't even know that there was a prog festival in Los Angeles, and they were
Mm.
from Los Angeles.
Right. Yeah,
So
because back then the scene was so small, that it was really and you didn't have so much of the internet, spreading the news. But I think for both Progfest and for Nairfest, I think it would be really cool if they did that job and went back and found the visuals and remastered them and put them out. Because especially now that those festivals don't even exist anymore, I think everyone would love to see all those great concerts.
Oh yeah, even if there's just a couple songs from each of the bands, that at least to for people that went there, they can have the memories of it, and then people's I never went to any of the Near Fest because at the time I was in California and I couldn't afford the travel and and the hotels because they tend to be expensive.
Yep.
And but when I moved here to Maine, I went to two festivals. The one in Pittsburgh called 3RP, and then I went to Ross Fest in 2012.
Right. Yeah.
But but when it comes to Maine, and I say this a lot, Maine is a wasteland when it comes to any rock-oriented music. Yeah. It's mostly country and hip hop.
Oh wow!
Which is a weird combination, but once in a while we do get what they call those 70s revival bands to come by and do their hits.
Yep.
But other than that, we don't have any newer bands that come up to play here. So it's like it's kind of like a wasteland. So in order for me if I wanted to go see a band, I'd have to go out of state.
Right. And
it just wasn't really financially feasible for me to do that.
Yeah. Well, at least you have Stephen King.
Yeah. But he's either in California or in his Florida home. It used to be before I moved up here, my girlfriend told me that you would see him in some of the local grocery stores every once in a while. But since I've been up here, I haven't seen him. I passed by his house, but never seen him. Have you guys ever recorded any of your performances?
You know what? We've been very bad with it. First of all, we didn't have a very long period of playing live. I think the last concert White Willow played was in 2007, maybe. Basically because of me, we had our kids and there just wasn't time or not really that much desire on my part to keep playing live. Because as a prog band, you never get a tour, maybe these days, but at least back then it was impossible to build an actual tour. All you had was, a festival in Mexico and a festival in France, and it's just insanely expensive to do it and a lot of work. So I decided around 2007 that we weren't going to do live anymore. So the only thing we have is our Nairfest concert was recorded. And I got the tapes for that. And I was actually working on those tapes last summer. They have a lot of sound issues. There's sort of dropouts and things like that. So I'm trying to reconstruct it a little bit. And I'm hoping that by next summer, I'll have something to release from that concert. But we don't have, there's audience recordings and things like that. But, of course, the sound quality isn't great. But I think that's, at least for our generation of prog bands, that was the biggest challenge, was simply you never got to play enough live. You never got real live experience because you only had those festivals. You never had actual tours.
Right. Yeah. And also most of those were really, it wasn't really until the past, I want to say 10 years that the internet has been used more for getting information out about when the next albums were coming out from various bands, and also, if they were going to play live, it almost like you had to be on the band's newsletter
Yeah.
in order to find out what was going on with them. But now with Facebook and Twitter, you find out more about what's going on by your favorite band or musician. And I think that's where newer bands have that advantage over bands that maybe started in the mid 80s to 90s that were just at the beginning of the internet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think that's very different now because, and I have to say I'm glad for the new bands, because if you start out today with the prog band, you have a scene and you have a sort of infrastructure that you enter into, and there's a sort of system to how things work. There's established labels that you can get signed to. You get your song on the cover CD of Prog Magazine. There's a sort of path to the audience. Back when we started, there was none of that. When we started, I didn't even have a computer, so I didn't even know about the internet. So it was all word by mouth. I only knew of the Laser's Edge in terms of labels. It was very different, but now there's a whole ecosystem, which is wonderful, both for the fans and for the bands, and the fact that there's just so many bands and so many great bands, professional, because that's another thing about the early to mid 90s scene was you had some bands, it was beginning to, bubble up a little bit, but no one had access to real recording budgets or anything like that. So it was often dodgy, great
right.
songs often, but bad recordings. But all that's changed today. Everything is super professional and every band sounds great. And there's so much amazing talent out there now among young prog bands that I'm just really in awe.
Oh yeah. You can't, it used to be you can only count the amount of prog bands on your fingers. And now it's like you got so many that it's hard to, actually, it's nowadays with all these bands, it's hard really for the listener to keep up with what's new.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes even within bands that they've already are into, to keep up with it. Because there was I'll have to admit, there was a time that I completely lost track of White Willow. And countless other bands that I was listening to on a regular basis, and it just because more bands were coming out, so it was like kind of started to feel like I was spreading my my listening in. But then I kind of got to the point now where it's like I'm not going to worry about if I miss something, because I'll just stick with the bands that I do know, and then every once in a while I'll go and grab something new. But and that's why it was and like I told you, I missed out on I believe only one of your remasters, your very first White Willow album.
Yeah.
I got the second two.
Yeah.
I think I got it through either Greg or Ken's site. I don't remember which one. Yeah. And they sound, and I'll tell you, those two sound fantastic.
Yeah, the remastering really helped. I thought they sounded good too.
Well, I think because, like you were saying, is back in the 90s, you didn't even if you had access to some of the recording, good recording devices, it's somewhat different, after 2000, how these bands are recording their music. Some are still using tape, and some are gone full digital using what do they call it? The cut and paste I'm not
Mm.
sure what to add things in, without doing a whole retake
Yep.
of the song.
Mm.
And but also too, I noticed that the recording techniques nowadays compared to in the 90s, it's like everything sounds so good.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot of bands back in the late 80s, early 90s, prog bands specifically. It sounded like the drums were like recorded like in another country. They were so way back in the mix that it wasn't. You know, you often wondered, well, if they haven't mixed that far back, why do they have a drummer? You know,
Yeah.
is but if those bands that recorded that way for whatever reason had their music remastered, I think that it would make good music, great music, and
Mm.
you get to hear the full potential. And
Yeah.
a lot of times when they, I notice when you get some CDs remastered, I remember there was a big thing about that in the early 2000s, about how some people thought by making them louder made them remastered.
Mm.
And it's like I heard some remasters that it just sounded like someone was um, playing music so loud that it just like blew out part of the speaker, and it had just an awful sound,
Mm.
And but then there's some really good remasters out there, so it's like, and I think a lot of people that are remastering things now are learning from those mistakes.
Yeah, I think so too. Thankfully things have changed because there was a time in the, I guess, especially the late 90s and the early 2000s that remastering was all about volume, and you just had to, brick wall it, like they say, where everything is just running to the max the whole time. And that creates listener fatigue. You just get tired and you get a headache basically from listening to it. And I think now people have really begun to appreciate dynamics. The fact that the music flows up and down, and that you have quiet bits and loud bits, which to me is what prog to a large degree is about. It's the contrast, it's the quiet then the loud, it's the light then the dark, things like that. And I think both in terms of modern recordings and also modern remasters, people have become a lot more aware of of retaining those dynamics. And you can remaster and you can make things sound uh, good and present without killing the dynamics, thankfully, these days.
Oh yeah, that and so wanted to ask you, I was looking at your partial discography. Is 1995 the first time you recorded something, or is that the very first recording? I
It
guess you
was
would say professional recording.
Yeah, it was the first released recording. That was the first White Willow album. We actually started working on that album in the studio in 93, but then we were sort of in and out and on and off, and we switched studios a few times. And then the album didn't come out until 1995. But that was the first professional release, first time I'd been in a studio, with the desk and the tape machines and stuff like that. And I think it became clear to me very quickly that one of my favorite things about making music is being in a studio and tweaking sound, and all the technical parts of it is something that I really enjoy.
Well, like I told you, uh, between that album and the latest one, Future Hopes, are tied for my favorites.
Mm.
Because I think personally those two I would recommend to anybody if they wanted to know what White Willow is all about.
Mm.
Um, because the first one has a more gothic classic feel to it, and you know obviously Future Hope has a more futuristic, more current feel to it,
Mm.
and both progressive, but just in two different ways. And that's, to me, that's what I like, when bands and musicians don't repeat what they've done in the past.
Mm.
And unfortunately, most of the more popular progressive rock bands today tend to do that. And you can hear similar themes, similar ways to, it's almost like they're resting on their laurels in a way.
Mm.
And again, they're not pushing themselves to do something a little different, outside of their comfort zone. And it tends to be like, it could be releasing 5 albums that sound all the same. So it's like almost like you should call them part 1 through 5 instead of giving them individual titles.
Yeah.
And that's what, with White Willow, I noticed that with each album, it's like it has, as they say, a signature sound. It's White Willow, but you're not repeating.
Yeah. No, a lot of people say that, and I'm really happy that people hear that, because that's something that we've always strived for. And personally, I have a little bit of musical ADHD, so I get very quickly bored if I do the same thing. So for every White Willow album, I've tried to have a different vision, a different goal for what we were trying to achieve. And often, maybe trying to do something that I know I'm not particularly used to, or maybe even particularly good at, and then just trying to learn it as part of the process. To me, that's very satisfying. So in a way, the less I know about something I'm going into, the more excited I am. And of course, then you don't always succeed, but at least you have fun doing it. And sometimes you succeed.
I think it's like some prog bands and some rock bands are solely in for the money aspect, and there's no fun.
Mm.
And I think that's why some don't last long, because they have no fun. And it's like, I mean, the genre is a very tricky thing, because it's not, it's not widely listened to, because it's a little group of us that listen to it, and we're all spread out all over the world. But I do know from personal experience that the general public does want to listen to something different, but they don't know where to go.
Yeah, that's true.
They want something different. It doesn't even have to be progressive rock music. It could be anything, but it's like they're only in their own little bubbles, so to speak, of the music, and that's all they listen to. And I was guilty of that, in the 80s and in the early 90s. I stayed into certain bubbles of music, and I didn't, and I think now I'm going back and finding these bands that I didn't listen to them the first time around, because I was too, I won't listen to anything outside of this area, and I'm just discovering so many different bands now, and like 99% of the bands that I discover are from friends on Facebook. Whenever I see someone mention a band, I immediately go research it and find out, and then look on YouTube to see if someone put something up on the band, and then if I like it, then I go and invest in them, and hopefully find their, I try to buy stuff, a majority of my stuff, from the band itself. And then The only time I don't is if postage uh, is almost the same price as the actual
Yeah.
CD. Then it's like, then it kind of, it's like, okay, well, I need to find something that's inexpensive, compared to,
Yeah. Mm.
but a
That's actually
majority
a
of it.
Yeah, no, that's actually a big challenge for those of us who live in Norway because it's insanely expensive to send things from here. So often, if fans contact me from America, I'll tell them to just buy it locally because it's so much cheaper than for me to send it from here because it does cost pretty much the same as the CD or the LP costs. Um, so it's a lot cheaper to buy it locally then.
Or at least from places like Symphonic or Laser's Edge.
Yeah, exactly. Support your local prog vendor.
Yeah, because at least they're, you're unfortunately, you're not getting the full amount to the band, but at least you're giving more than if you were to buy it, let's say on Amazon
Hmm.
or there's quite a few other places, eBay,
Hmm.
and out here in the United States we have something called deep discount.
Okay.
Uh, but there's a lot of places you can get it. I've even found some obscure prog band CDs at a local store here in in Bangor. I was surprised. I would go, "Why? This is weird. I wouldn't expect because it's such a closed off area when it comes to
Mhm.
music. I mean, granted, they have just the mainstream artists, and they don't, and it's like they don't have those other bands. So it was really surprising finding different prog bands,
Hmm.
both rock and metal,
Yeah.
in that store. So you never know where you're going to find something in a store. You got to always look, you know, and so I wanted to ask. I know you just put out a new Opium Cartel. What it, are you going to be doing anything with White Willow, or you're just putting them on the back burner, so to speak?
Hmm. Well, I never quite know in advance what the next thing I'm going to do is, but now the next thing is this Donner project, which is a sort of electronica project. But then after that, I'll probably go back to some White Willow. I have actually a whole album written. I just need to finish the recordings and things like that. So I'm guessing that I'll be doing that in the coming year, trying to finish that album, which is sort of a follow up to Future Hopes, probably with some of the same musicians as well.
Oh,
So yeah.
yeah, like I just I can't wait till I get the Opium Cartel CD in the mail or from UPS.
Mm.
They got it on hold somewhere, and I got to go pick it up. But I do enjoy the first one,
Yeah.
and it was just kind of interesting. It's like a, a completely different sound for you to to do. Though, and um, but I still hear a little bit of White Willow in there, but not enough where how some musicians, if they'd have more than one band, they tend to kind of sound too much alike,
Mm.
or if you guys if musicians create a super group,
Mm.
they tend to sound too much like their individual band, but all mixed in, and it's
Yeah.
like I like when musicians, like I said earlier, I like when they can do something a little different,
Mm.
and that's okay. That's either with the music itself or the production or even the overall vibe
Mm.
of it, you know that that's something. Okay, Jacob's on that. I know that. You know, and I was looking at that list, and it's like you got a lot, of bands not only bands that you were in control of, but guesting on other bands.
Mm.
You know, it's like I'm gonna put the list of that partial discography when this goes onto YouTube,
Yeah.
so that other people can go and check out the different stuff, and if it's and if it's still available on CD, if so they can get it, so they can listen to all the different music that you're on.
Mm. Thanks.
I like to help out with people doing the music the best that I can. Uh, and when it's a band that I really like or a musician I really like, I like to let others know about them, because it's important, because that way they kind of know, okay, well, this is in a way, a lot of I think it could be said for anybody, that the music that people listen to kind of tells you a little bit about what they are, as a human being.
Absolutely.
And I'm always getting new music, always trying to find something that's new. Um, I do tend to stay within the more, I guess you call analog stuff.
Mm.
Um, I do like some digital, but um, like the electronic song that you sent me.
Mm.
It has that almost like that 80s vibe to it,
Yeah.
and I think that's what a lot. I know it's a lot of musicians, whether they're you know in bands or they're doing soundtracks, seems to be a lot of 80s retro sounds coming out.
I think it has something to do with the generation that's sort of out there making music now. And it's interesting for my part that back in the 80s, I was mostly listening to 70s music. That was my, purely prog snob phase. In the mid 80s, I discovered prog. But all that 80s music was in the background. And I listened to some of it. I liked Ultravox and quite a few synth pop things, but my main focus was on 70s rock. Uh, and so it's really in the in hindsight that I've realized how much that 80s music actually meant to me and how much it influenced me, and I think that was part of the impetus for starting the Opium Cartel in the first place. Was I put White Willow on hold. I was a little bit burnt out on prog. I didn't listen to prog for a long time, and I was sort of delving into my own, musical childhood and rekindled this love for 80s art pop and things like that. And then I thought, okay, I I want to do what's fun. I don't want to. Suddenly, the idea of a new White Willow album seemed like hard work and like something that I was more obliged to do than something I really wanted to do. So I put White Willow on hold, and at that point, I got myself a little bit of a studio, and I thought, okay, I'm going to just do what I think is fun, and I made the first Opium Cartel album, and I had fun, and so suddenly it became a second and a third one, and again with the Telepath record, much the same thing. When, like you probably in the 80s, I also listened to a lot of thrash metal and things like that I'd sort of forgotten about, that I hadn't really realized how much it meant to me until suddenly that started coming back to me, and I made Telepath, which is sort of a mixture of metal, doom metal, thrash metal mixed with that Italian, synth soundtrack sound. So all of those things have really been journeys back in my past, back to my youth, back to my childhood, and the things that excited me then, guided by the principle that whatever I do musically should be fun, quite simply.
Yeah, and like you said, I think a lot of, well, me personally, getting as I got older, I tend to start to revisit music of my childhood, and I had just, it was just amazing to remember that I always thought that I got into prog in the late 80s, in actually in the early 90s. As that was my memory of it. But then as I go getting a chance to go look back more into it, I've been listening to it since early 80s, and I didn't even know. I mean, my very first two cassettes were that Classic Yes and Queen's Greatest Hits, and that was in 1981. Those are my first two,
Two
and
great collections.
and going back to actually 1980. Now those were the first ones I bought, but someone bought me on my birthday in 1980 Rush Permanent Waves, and it had just been released, like I think in January of that year, and then my birthday was in April, and someone gave it to me, and I was like, why are you giving me this? I don't know who these people are. And so I would say that was my first introduction into something that I didn't know about until almost a decade and a half later. And so it's like I have roots in progressive rock music. It's just that like I said, at the time, I didn't know what that was. I just thought, oh, it's just different rock. It's something different. And that's what I always been. When I listen to music, that's my main concern: is it different? Is it going to expand my thinking? And is it going to expand how I feel? Because a lot of this music, when the perfect way for me to listen to a lot of progressive music and rock music is on the headphones, and then with the lights are dim or out, and just close my eyes, and then it's like you get taken to different worlds, and sometimes you connect exactly to where the artist is originally intended, some far off, land, whether it's in the past or in the future, some mythical land, and sometimes you can really connect. And I have had in several instances, whatever the album was, I was almost in the same headspace as the band, because then finding out at a later date that I was in the same headspace because reading, interviews and different articles. So it's like, that's when I think music is at its best, is when you can, be in the same headspace.
Definitely. And I think that's probably also one of the things that really appeals to me, to you, to most people about prog rock, and that I remember from discovering prog rock, is that feeling of, being taken on a journey. I remember, I think my first Rush album was A Farewell to Kings. And that was also, I got it in the 80s. Didn't really know. I just read about them in the context of other bands that I liked. I saw that they were often mentioned along with Yes. So I thought, okay, I'll listen to this band. And that was one of those records that really took you on a journey, to Xanadu and out into outer space with Cygnus X1. So that's always one of my favorite things about prog, is that feeling of just being, taken on a magic carpet ride to some strange place. I love that.
Oh yeah, I still, speaking of Rush, it's like um, the ending part of 2112, the song,
Mm.
is, I don't know about you, but, and I'm sure probably other people do, you get kind of like the hair on the back of your neck standing up.
Mm.
And to me, if when bands and music, when music in general does that, then that's, I think, to me, that's where you connect, and you've gone on that journey with them from the beginning to the end, and you feel almost, like, wow, it's like an experience that, in some ways, even though I have never been on one, a roller coaster.
Mm.
You're going through the ups and downs, through the loops and stuff, and then when you get back to the end, it's like, you know, you feel like, wow, I was just been on this amazing journey that need to go on again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why with progressive rock music, that's what they do, because that's what I think the musicians like. They like going on these journeys, and they figure, well, that, other people want to go on these journeys, so let's, to me, music has always been my drug. Whatever, like some of, the 60s and 70s bands, whatever things they were taking to create their music.
Mm.
It's like, how did they say it? A contact high? You get a contact high out of their music.
Mm.
And, and I get that same feeling from a lot of bands now, yours included, because it's also for me an escape.
Mm.
Music, especially in these current times, have been a big escape, because and music also too, in my experience, have always been that special friend that rarely disappoints. Once in a while you go, hey, why'd you go over there? But I'll still stick with you.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I get the feeling.
there's some out there that you go, why did that band go that direction? Why did that artist go in that direction? And it's like, it's nice, again, like we've been discussing, that how you have different outlets for music, and I think that's a good thing, so that you got your White Willow sound here, you got your Opium Cartel here, and then Telepath here, and then Donner over here. You got different things. So, they all, kind of have, like the Telepath thing I was listening to earlier, and it, like you said, it has that metal sound, and then it has that soundtrack feel to it at the same time.
Mm.
And I think out of all of them, that's the one that's mostly, I think it's mostly sounds more towards a White Willow sound than the other ones.
Mm.
In a way, it's a more, if White Willow went expanded outwards more into the metal and soundtrack territory. But it sounds, that alone, I think, could be a great soundtrack for some movie, because it has that mythical feel to it.
Mm. Cool. It's good to hear.
And I'm gonna guess that I was named after a Oyster Cult song?
That's correct.
Yeah, I had a
Yeah.
feeling because I know you wrote a book about that
Mhm.
band.
Mhm. I was
And
actually originally considering calling it Flaming Telepaths, but then I thought, maybe that's too obvious, and then I cut it down to Telepath.
it's kind of cool because um, there's not that many of the metal bands now. It's like it seems like they're going for either ultra technical or ultra extreme.
Mm.
It's like no one's doing atmospheric.
Yep.
It seems like they have to fill. The sound has every bit of sound that's coming out of the speakers has to be filled with music in order for it to be for them to call it metal.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, it's much more than just that. And Telepath reminds me of, you know, how Black Sabbath approached their music in the early days, and even in the different incarnations of bands, Deep Purple,
Mm.
Blue Oyster Cult, all those bands. It's the overall vibe that those bands have is from what I heard on Telepath, it sounds like you're capturing that
Yeah. Well,
without,
that's good to hear you say, because to me, we talked about how much great modern prog there is, which I really think. I don't think there's so much great modern metal. I often am disappointed when I listen to new metal because, like you say, they have to fill every nook and cranny with just tons of sound, and everything is sort of hyped up and sort of, I don't know. It's, to me, exactly like you mentioned, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple. They were musical bands. They had a certain swing. It was organic. It wasn't that that just punch you in the face. It's all about energy and power these days. But those were nuanced bands, and of course, Blue Oyster Cult. It was organic music. It had a musicality as well as being powerful and sometimes a little scary. But they managed to combine that in ways that was very musically pleasing, which I think is something that maybe has gone lost a little bit now that every metal band has to sort of out loud each other.
or out,
Yeah.
they have to play like a million notes, all the time,
Yeah. And that was
it
fun in the 80s. It was fun, when speed metal and thrash metal came around. It was fun because it was different. We'd never heard people like Metallica or Megadeth before. We'd never heard that kind of music, and I loved it. But okay, now we've heard that. We've heard people, shred their guitars to bits, and maybe it's time to get back to that more musical form of heavy metal.
yeah, the soul,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's like, because while it's not, to me, it's nice to see a musician, either the guitarist or the keyboardist, play all those notes, and where the classical music vibe comes into play.
Mm.
I like to hear something more bluesy, that it's like, okay, so maybe they're not playing perfect notes. It's coming out from their soul, and that to me is far more interesting than a musician that's let's say that they're classically trained,
Mm.
and then it's like, I mean, for instance, let's go to one band that I I love the early stuff, but then it just seems to be repeating itself. Is Dream Theater.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, that they're doing the same thing over again, but they're also following some prog bands that stay in that same area. They're not using that word progressive anymore.
Mm.
It's almost like the word to them is not a noun, it's more of a title,
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
and it's like it'd be nice that if these bands will get back to kind of, being a little more experimental. I mean, you don't have to be like we were talking about, from the prog fest that you played at Duet Machina, which they were just like this. They were very complex sounding band, and that only, I think that only kind of catered to certain group of people that like that. It wasn't, but if you can have some of that involved in some of the more, I like to call them the mainstream prog bands. If you combine some of that, then you're making it interesting while not going completely off the ledge,
And I think also, if we're talking about the band like Dream Theater, I think one thing that you can tell, that listeners, I think, can tell even better than the musicians themselves is, whether there's real enthusiasm behind what they're doing. To me, it feels like it's quite a long time since Dream Theater were truly enthusiastic about what they did. I don't sense that sort of colorful sort of, joy of the first. I think Images and Words, for instance, is a great record and represented something very new and different when it came out. But I haven't heard anything like that from them since, and I feel like the new albums are so, I mean, it's great. They're fantastic musicians. John Petrucci is an amazing guitarist, but it's a little bit joyless in a way.
Right.
It's like it's a job they go to,
Yeah, I hear that with their music, and it's like I go, it's like every time you go to hear them, it's like I want you guys to do something a little different. Maybe it doesn't have to be all in your face. It seems with them, it's like either it's all in your face or they have a little ballad, but they don't have anything that's in between.
Yeah, very true.
And to me, it's more exciting to listen to something where they're going musically, they're just taking some chances, not a lot of chances, because then you're going to completely lose your base audience. But it's like trying to educate your base audience that there's more out there than what we've done on these albums, and we want to expand on that, and we want to take you on that journey with us. We are going to explore places that we never did before, and again, that's why I think that there's a lot of what is it, that forum that Sean used to run, Prog Ears.
Yeah.
There was a lot of battle as to what was prog and what wasn't, and it got to a point where honestly I left.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, at the joy, like you were saying, the joy just went out of it. Because the audience, the fans were getting too technical about it, and it's like if you don't like it, just don't listen to it. Find something you like, because if you spend your energies on things you don't like, you're never going to find the good music out there. And also too is like if you just say, well, I only listen to, let's say, bands like Magma, I can't listen to anything other than that, or if you're only listen to bands like Spock's Beard, you're really cheating yourself out of music out there.
Yeah. But it's interesting what you say about how a band can evolve and sort of educate their audience along. And I think one band that did do that very well was Rush. I think, and it's interesting to compare with Dream Theater, because Dream Theater obviously were very influenced by Rush, but I think Rush had that down to really fine art that they evolved, but they evolved sort of in time with their audience. It wasn't very abrupt changes from one album to the next, but they always brought in, a few new elements. They brought in the synthesizer carefully, and then gradually, it was like, okay, here's basically synth rock, but the audience came along on the ride because it was gradual and it sort of followed the musical trends of the time. It was sounds that you were gradually being exposed to. And I thought they were so good at keeping, the core identity of their sound at the same time that they evolved and they started, flirting with new genres. They had a little bit of reggae, they had a little bit of synth pop, but they never stopped being Rush. I mean, you would never ever mistake a Rush song for anything else. So I
Oh, I
thought
know.
no, but they did that so well. That's one thing I admire about them, how they never stayed in the same place, but never lost their fan base either. They managed to pace it so correctly.
I mean, and then of course you get some of the purists out there that they refuse to go on the journey with the band.
Yeah,
They
I guess
stop
there's always some.
certain points and say, and I see it a lot on Facebook. People say, "Well, I don't like this band after a certain point," and then my question always would be is, did you listen to any of that? And there's a few times where I hear people, no, I just heard that they changed their sound. Well, the thing is, this is okay. It's okay that if you say, I only like a band up to a certain album, as long as you heard the other album after that, and you can make your decision based on what your ears hear, not what everybody else does. That's what I notice on just about everything, music and movies. People rely on other people's opinions and they can't make up their own opinion. It's like they're afraid that if they like, let's say, movie wise, if they like the Friday the 13th series, and then, but everybody else will go, well, that was an awful series. It's like, to me, it's like, who cares what everybody says? If you enjoy it, you enjoy it. Absolutely. And if you like, a certain pop or synth pop band, then it doesn't. I used to believe in that term guilty pleasures, but now it's to me that I'm not guilty of it. I listen to it.
Yeah,
I'll watch it.
Agree. I think that goes absolutely the same for movies as it goes for music. I think guilty pleasures is something that we need to move past. There's no guilt in liking something, If you like it, you like it. And the reason we like things is because it resonates with us, because it has some meaning to us. And that meaning is going to be individual to each person. So even to argue about things like that is so utterly pointless, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. You can go to your record, CD, or even your iTunes or something like that. And you can pick out songs, and they're going to have a meaning for whether you bought them at the time that they were released, or you bought them at a time when in your life when something either life-changing or just a moment. Let's say when you met a song that you heard on the radio at the time that you met your wife, or a movie that was playing in the movie theaters that you both went to. That one, regardless of if it's a good movie, it's a movie that stays with you all the time, and the same with the music, it stays with you. Exactly. And sometimes it goes into the background, but then the amazing thing is now you can, especially with all the different platforms you have out there, you can revisit and hopefully, that you are purchasing the music, whether it's on a CD or digital, because because I know there's a lot of platforms out there that are not paying you musicians
Mm.
properly and pocketing all the money for themselves. And that's why I keep hearing about Bandcamp,
Mm.
how a lot of you guys are on Bandcamp, that you get what you deserved.
Mm.
And that's why it's like, if anybody um is trying to buy progressive rock music and it's not readily available, whether it's Amazon, eBay, or through shops like Greg's and Ken's. Bandcamp is the other way that you can, if you like digital music, you can just buy it straight there, and
Mm.
it's immediately in your on your computer. You know, Me, I prefer the physical media because it's just, I don't know. It's probably not for the same reasons a lot of the vinyl lovers like it. It's like I can go and say that's in my collection.
Mm.
Where it's digital, it's like I think it's in there somewhere.
Mm.
You know. Um, I do, whenever I get CDs, I do rip them onto a USB drive to put in my car to listen to while I'm driving. And I know the quality is not the best that way, but for me, it's easier than bringing a stack of CDs. And you know,
Mm.
sometimes you just want to have that hands free. I don't want to be able to go, oh well, that CD's over, I can pop into the next one.
Mm.
At least with the USB, it's they're readily available.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. I used to have stacks of CDs falling all over the car, and I'm glad to be done with that era. I have it all now, either in my phone or, you can have it on the memory stick, but it's a lot more convenient.
Oh yeah,
Mm.
and I do, and I know that a lot of people, they like to buy digital only. And that's I think that that's good if you don't have the room for uh, a physical collection, because I notice that a lot of places, a lot of people like to go for smaller living spaces, and they don't have the room for a good record collection or movie collection or CD collection. So it's like that's when digital comes uh, play perfectly.
Mm.
Just as long as they back it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said, though, I think both with movies and music, if you put on a record, or if put a movie into your VHS or DVD player, there's a certain investment that you put into it, that is going to make you more likely to sit and listen or watch, the whole way through. If people are, whether you're on Spotify browsing through songs or whether you're on Netflix browsing through movies, it's so easy to get distracted. It's easy to think that, nah, I don't want to watch this, so I'm going to try this instead. And I know from my own part, at least, if I put on a record, or if I, slot in a VHS tape, I'm going to sit there and listen to it, or watch the whole thing through, because, otherwise I have to get up and switch it again. And it just creates a different kind of focus that I really like, and that I think is more respectful to the music or the movie that you're
Yeah,
experiencing.
that's the one thing I do notice, and I've been guilty of it, where sometimes at nights I'm trying to look for a movie, and it's taking as long as how long a movie would be to find one.
Exactly.
And
You
it's
just
like,
browse and browse and browse.
and it's like with the where you use VHS, that's one format I was glad when DVD came out. Because I just constant rewinding and everything of the tape. It's like there was a few times where the tape is broken,
Mm.
and it's like, when DVD came out, I was like, okay, here, this is something better. I have since graduated to Blu-ray. I'm not 100% on board with this 4K thing because I've seen on the horizon that there's 8K coming out and 10K, and it's like, are you going to just re-release everything over and over and over and over again? And it's like, I mean, I can understand re-releasing it once, maybe twice, but when you're doing it every new format, you have to re-release it, and remaster it and get it. It's almost like they're saying, some either the movies or the music are kind of going, there's a sucker born every minute. We can remaster this again, but it was remastered 10 years ago, and it sounded great. Oh, but we found, this and that, and it's like, where does it end?
Yeah, no, I agree completely, and I think it's really, it's tedious when things are just endlessly remastered and rehashed like that, and obviously there's only so far you can go in terms of the quality that you can get out of an old product. I mean, if you're talking about, let's say an old horror movie or something, it didn't look that great to begin with. So what the hell is the difference if it's 8K or 10K? No one can tell the difference anyway. I do think that the sort of the last step, Blu-ray was good. Like you definitely see a positive difference from DVD to Blu-ray. So that was great. Beyond that, I just can't see that it makes much difference as long as you're watching it at home on a TV.
Right. And one that they've remastered it a few times from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray, and then they did it again in Blu-ray. Suspiria. Now, Suspiria, they put it on both a 4K scan and 4K. I'm not 100% sure what the difference is, but I did notice from the previous Blu-ray to the 4K scan, the colors are more vibrant and what they should have been. And probably what they were when the movie was first released back in 1977. But since then, they didn't get the right colors in there when it went to VHS. And at that time, I didn't notice the difference. But then I hadn't had that movie since I had a VHS copy, because the DVD and the original Blu-rays kept on going out of print. So when I saw that they were putting it out again on Blu-ray, I was like, okay, I got to get this before. It cost me $50. I mean, that's the most I've ever spent for a single movie.
Yeah, but it's Suspiria.
I mean, and then that soundtrack. I mean, you can literally scare the daylights out of yourself if you listen to that soundtrack in the dark. Because it brings out things, and that's to me is a powerful thing with music, that you can really bring out things. Visuals, even though it's not visual, you're getting the audio part, but it's like you can close your eyes and then the visuals come to mind. I mean, you start seeing all these witches, coming out, and it's like it's a musical. It's a really powerful thing, but it doesn't have to always sound powerful to achieve that.
Absolutely.
You put out a really haunting synth style music, like the 80s, what they were like on the 80s horror movies. And that is as powerful as any thrash or technical metal, death metal that's out there. At least to me,
Yeah, no, I
there's,
completely agree. In fact, I was, I don't know, have you seen the remake of Suspiria yet?
yes, I did. And I'm kind of on the fence about that. I mean, I'm glad they didn't do, you know, a scene by scene remake. Uh, and who was it? Uh, Tom York did the
Yeah,
soundtrack.
because that was my thing. Like I heard that they were remaking it, and I thought, okay, I'm not always crazy about remakes, but I thought that I'm sure you can put an interesting spin on that. But then I saw that it was Tom York doing the music, and I realized I don't know if I can see Suspiria without the original soundtrack. It's like to me that soundtrack means as much as the movie does.
Oh yeah,
So I haven't seen it yet, but I was just wondering, yeah, how did you
I
experience?
I saw it, but I wasn't. I didn't really, honestly, I didn't remember it.
Mm,
It didn't impact me the same way as the original. Um, and I know some people like remakes, especially if they're the. I noticed the under 35 crowd.
mm,
Um, they're not willing to go beyond what uh, watch things that are older, uh, or listen to things that are older. They like to kind of stay within um, what they're listening to, and remakes are almost, it's kind of like a, best way I could describe it. It's kind of like, you have that big classic book, let's say Wuthering Heights,
mm,
and I don't know if they had in Norway or not. These things in English classes they had called footnotes.
mm,
It would basically be uh, a condensed version of what that book was.
mm.
And that's what I kind of, a majority of remakes make me feel that way. Like it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
condensed version of that, or they're missing the whole overall vibe
mm,
of the movie.
yeah.
You know, if a movie that, whatever the time period the movie was from, it captures that time period.
That's exactly
And
my problem with the remakes. That's I'm glad to hear you say that because that's what I'm thinking is, you see a movie and one thing is the story, but another thing is that it's a document of the time that it was made. Um,
exactly.
so how can you divorce that from the time it was made? That's what I don't really get about these remakes is, you know, you lose the atmosphere that made it special in the first place. But that could be just because we're getting old and that was the way we experienced those movies. I guess to millennials, the context doesn't matter and they just want the story presented in their own way. I can understand that, but to me, I don't get the same joy out of watching remakes because I want to
And,
see the period.
and also too is it sometimes remakes and newer movies, they lose their interest after 15 minutes if there's no action or anything jumping out at them
Mm,
within that first 15 minutes, and it's like, and then we never called it back in the 70s and 80s. We never called movies that were slow. We never called them slow burn.
mm,
They were called, that's a recent term. And
yeah,
that's because of the younger people, that's what they call them. They call them
mm,
slow burn
mm,
because it doesn't accelerate to their mindset, because everything, it's because of technology. It's like everything is coming at them a million miles per hour.
mm,
And sometimes they don't have time or don't make the time to actually sit down and enjoy it. They just want something quick, and that's it, you
yeah,
know. And so they take an old movie, and the only thing that is connected to the old movie is a lot of times is just the title,
mm,
you know. But I gotta admit, there is one of a newer remakes that I saw that I thought not necessarily made it better, but gave it like a different perspective to the thing was Pet Cemetery.
Okay, yeah, that one I haven't seen yet, but that it looked
It hasn't.
interesting. It seemed like they had really put some thought into it.
Yeah, it was almost like just from looking at the movie from a different angle,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out.
and but the thing is, this is a lot of these. I do notice on a lot of horror movies, especially the indie ones, they are going back to that '80s sound.
Yeah, they certainly are. Have you seen It Follows?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's one
that
of
that
those. That had a really good soundtrack, I thought.
yeah, there was a lot of good ones. I mean, that's again, that's the fantastic thing about the streaming sites, that are out there. Um, you can find these movies a lot quicker um, than before,
Mm.
and there's a lot of them that I own, but then sometimes I get lazy and I just go, well, I don't want to go over to the library and get that movie. I could just find it here on
Yeah.
Amazon or Netflix or something,
Mm.
and it's like that to me. I mean, some people will say, well, that's you're not. I don't know. It just seems like some people don't get the idea that it's nice to have the media to be portable.
Mm.
I think as long as you own it, I don't see a big deal about it.
No, no, I do
You
the same
know,
thing. It's quite often that I end up watching something on Netflix that is already in my shelf just because I'm on the couch and I can't be
you know.
bothered.
Oh yeah, there is plenty of that.
Mm.
Um, uh, they got so much to choose from out there, music and movies that you never know what uh, that's why it's always neat to be able um, to keep your mind open to new things.
Mm.
That I mean, there's certain extreme horror movies that I stay away from, because a lot of the other thing too is a lot of modern stuff is it's all about the gore and it's not about the story. And
Yeah.
it's like you got to have a healthy happy medium of both of them.
True.
Make the story right. I
Mm.
mean, but to me, I'd rather have a atmospheric story like um, the stuff that came out of England primarily in the '60s and '70s from Hammer
Mm.
and
Hammer.
Amicus, Tygon. I think those are
Yeah.
the three big ones. And I'd much rather have those kind of um, horror movies where it's got an atmosphere to it
Mm.
and a
Agreed.
story. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, and it's also the same. I kind of say, in a way, there's when we talk about some of the more extreme metal and stuff, it's like there's no atmosphere to it.
Mm. Mm.
So it all kind of it mirrors itself of music and movies. It's like they both can play it safe or they can copy something, which is kind of interesting when for music when you do someone else's song, you're not doing a remake, you're doing a cover.
Mm. Mm.
And I often wondered if I don't even think bands can get away with, let's say, if they want to do a remake of The Wall
Mm.
or remake of uh, Tommy. It's like you can't. I don't think you can get away with that.
No, that would be pretty hopeless.
People would be going, well, I'd rather watch the original. I'd rather listen to the original. And it's like, that's what a lot of people feel when a remake of a movie is out. They rather watch the original.
Yeah.
Because, the original, like we said a little bit ago, it has a special meaning.
Mm.
It came out at a time when, as that time period, now some of them that came out like in the 70s, they're extremely dated, but they're fun to watch.
Yeah. And part of the reason why it's fun is because they are dated, they show all the more of what the scene was like back then.
Oh yeah. And it's almost like in a way, kind of like a time machine. You get to see, you get to see the way that people actually used to go to the movie theaters, before VHS, where it's like, if you missed it in the movie theater, the only place you're going to be able to see it again is maybe on TV, and it's going to be all cut up.
Mm.
Or if you're lucky to be in an area that has a revival theater that will play those maybe a couple-year-old movies. But other than that, we didn't have. And same with television. It's like when the television series, each episode came on, if you didn't see it, there's a likelihood you weren't going to see it ever again unless in reruns years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
I remember that. I remember when Twin Peaks came on the first time. I was so desperately scared of missing an episode because you had to watch it. Those days are over.
Yeah, it's like binge watching. It's like, and I think the binge watching has created a new set of insomniacs because they, myself kind of included, because there's just sometimes I just get into it, and next thing I know it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like going, wait a second, and it's like, and then I'm just tired the rest of the whole day, and then sometimes I do it all over again, But it's like, I like to do that, but I also like the idea of waiting for next week's episode. And so what, besides the Donner, what else do you have in the works?
Well, mostly what I do these days is, of course, mixing and mastering. So let's see, I recently mixed an album by a Norwegian prog band called Matterhorn, which is pretty cool. Sort of rootsy music mixed with progressive rock. Right now I'm working on basically a sort of solo album from one of the guys from a Norwegian prog band called Pixie Ninja. This is a new project from one of the guys there. I have to look at my schedule to see what I'm working on, because I'm not very good at keeping these things in my head. Just a second. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm mixing an American band, actually a Texas band called Twin Lovers. I'll finish that mix soon. It's more on the sci-fi synth side of things. Yeah, a few things like that.
Yeah, it looks like 2020 is your busiest year.
Yeah, there was a lot of work, so that's good, of course. I'm happy for work. There's always something. And that's good, because one of the things about when you make music is it's good to work on other people's music to sort of reset your ears a little bit. And, otherwise it's easy to just get a little bit stuck. So I'm always glad to work on other people's stuff.
Yeah, I noticed also, let's see, where are we going back here? Just different people like you on several occasions, let's say like bands like Airbag, which I've heard of,
Hmm.
but I never heard them.
Yeah, great band, sort of a Norwegian Pink Floyd's, fantastic guitarists. Highly recommended.
And then another one here, I'm looking at doing a lot of remaster for a band called Rufus.
Yeah, Rufus is a classic 70s Norwegian prog rock band. Also highly recommended. Started out as progressive hard rock, went through a sort of symphonic rock phase, and then ended up as more of a jazz rock fusion kind of band. So I think by this point, I've almost remastered their whole catalog. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a good thing, is to keep busy. Especially, like I said, nowadays it's like we can't do any live concerts, so it's or at least not in the physical sense. I mean, I'm hoping it'd be kind of cool, as if applications like Zoom would someone will create a Zoom thing where the band doesn't have to all necessarily be in the same studio to do a live song. I mean, there's a lot of syncing that you have to get just right, but that might be something for the future.
Yeah, I think it's going to come in Norway. At least they did, not with people in separate places, but they did, sorry, they did small streaming concerts with a couple of musicians in a room playing live and streaming it on Zoom. And that was neat. I think the technology is still lagging a little bit in terms of being quick enough to accommodate different musicians in different places, because there's always that little bit of latency.
Right.
But that might come too.
And it'll also, even when it comes the day when you can actually, do live concerts, that's also a good thing, as while you're doing, let's say for instance yourself, that it's expensive for you to go to different places. So if you did like a live concert in your hometown, or or in a city that's big enough that you have an audience, and then you can film it for people, let's say in the United States that can't, or Australia, or South America, that can't afford to travel to see you in person. At least they can be able to watch live as it happens. I mean, the only downside is you don't get to feed off of their energy.
No, but maybe it's the price you have to pay, because I think, no matter, we talked in the beginning about back to normal, and I don't think we'll ever get back to completely normal. I think travel, for instance, is going to be not as frequent as it used to be.
Right.
And the whole concept of doing what we used to do, like travel to another country to watch a prog festival, I think maybe it's not going to be quite as viable. And then solutions like that are going to be good solutions, where you, like you say, you play in your hometown, but the whole world gets to see it if they want to.
Yeah, I mean, especially, like, again, like, even when prog bands were doing the festivals here in the United States, or the European festivals, or the ones in England, it's like not everybody can afford to go to every single festival out there, because the travel and the hotel rooms alone, are the biggest cost. I mean, the concert tickets are, based on those two, are nothing in comparison. I mean, you could probably buy for a whole weekend maybe a $200 concert tickets to see a festival of maybe 15 or so bands. But then you got to add, on the low end, a hotel, it'd be maybe 150 minimum, and then flying, from one coast to the other here in the United States is like anywhere from five to what it, $1,000. So it's like, depending on how many stops and everything like that. So it's like it would be something beneficial for someone that not so much is rooted in the tech world, but someone that has the musicians in mind to create an app where they can, even if they just rent a little recording studio and have a camera crew and broadcast it that way. I mean, you could do something like that.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I mean,
hopefully that will happen. And I'm thinking especially for Prague, where, because I know a lot of these Prague festivals have struggled because it's hard to get, first of all, Prague fans tend to be, not very young. So they'll have jobs and commitments that makes it hard for them to get around. And then you have the factor that they often happen in a different country from where you live. So there's only been, a certain privileged core of Prague fans who could do that traveling around to different festivals, which of course means that the festivals don't get super huge audiences. But if they did it this way, it would be a much lower threshold. They could sell a heck of a lot more tickets for a lower price that every Prague fan could afford. So why not? Maybe internet concerts are the future of Prague. We'll see.
could be, yeah, that'd be perfect for some people, and you can go as far as maybe even offer that, since we're recording it, once we, master it and work out any glitches, they could put it out on Blu-ray and be included in the cost, or you can have a package where you add a little extra for the Blu-ray. So it's like, then not only does band get their money for the concert, but you get it for Blu-ray, T-shirts, and any other merchandise.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting idea.
A lot of things that they can do now that will be amazing, because there's especially like, merchandise that some people may have forgotten to get, they when they, or it's too busy in the lines, at least from home you can buy it and not worry about being in a line.
Absolutely.
So do you have anything else you wanted to mention?
No, I mean, those who want to follow me, I will be releasing this Donner album probably in the springtime. And it features some cool guests. I have Keith Carlock on drums from Toto and Steely Dan. I've got Hedvig Mollestad, who also plays guitar on the Future Hopes album. She does a little bit of guesting. So it's me and good friends who do good things. And I think it's going to be a pretty cool record. It's a little bit of electronica. It's a little bit, almost a little bit funky and fusiony at times as well. So that's sort of the main thing that I have happening in the coming months anyway. So if people follow me on Facebook or whatever, I'll keep them updated.
Yeah, I just put the link to the discography thing down below. Nice. And I'm also going to put that on when this gets rebroadcasted on YouTube. I'm going to have that same link, and then your links to your Bandcamp, and also your any of your other social media you want me to put on there. You just message me, put everything up there so people can, if they don't know your music already, get to know you. And if they know you and need to fill in the gaps, they can do it that way too.
Perfect. Very good.
And then keep up on what's new coming out of your out of your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's lots of interesting things happening in the whole Norwegian prog scene now, so people should pay attention. Lots of great bands.
Oh yeah. Well, Jacob, I want to thank you for taking the time
My
out of your
pleasure.
schedule. I really appreciate this.
Me too.
And thank you again for all the great music, and great music to come.
Thanks. And thanks for allowing me on.
So again, I just posted down there the link for his discography. It's a partial one, but if you get in touch with Jacob, he can let you know the full discography, and also his bank camps will probably have all of that.
Yep. Very good.
All right. Well, thank you again so much. I appreciate
Ron.
this. And I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, we'll stay in touch. I'm still checking out all your movie suggestions.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no problem. I like sharing.
Good.
All right. Well,
We'll
thank
stay
you
in touch.
again.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.